BC carbon tax that it was applied to the carbon content of the fuel, and it's always been my impression that it was a carbon dioxide tax on the carbon dioxide emitted by combusting the fuel. And there's a difference of about a factor of 3.7 between the two.
Okay, it's the latter. That is correct.
Okay. CO2 tax.
It's per ton of CO2.
Per ton of CO2, not per ton of C.
One thing we haven't heard today as a framing is the cost of business as usual, other than generally, I think probably this crowd knows it, if we invest a little bit now, it'll make a big difference in the long run. But can anything else be said, or is there useful information about the cost of business as usual in the long run that needs to be appreciated more and frame the investments that need to be made in the near term?
Well, the smart-ass economist answer is there's no point in planning for the long run, for in the long run we're all dead.
Not our.
There's a slightly less snarky response though. Which is that, and this is something that's true more for the Northwest than maybe for other regions. Washington produces no fossil fuel whatsoever. So we import all our coal, all our natural gas, all our petroleum.
We used to.
A little bit of coal. I mean, but we're talking about a vanishingly small amount. As a consequence, we are spending billions of dollars a year. I think the region is putting 16 billion if gas prices are high outside the region. So there's sort of a, from a purely parochial regional perspective, continuing a business as usual economy with respect to fossil fuel imports is not terribly good business sense.
Hi, Eric, I am particularly interested, I liked seeing in the BC example, the issue, one of the 5 principles was to attend to the needs of low income with the issue of social justice. And given the sort of current political atmosphere of seeking, the sort of entitlements and all that, how would a carbon tax deal with the fact that unemployed and underemployed individuals need transportation getting where they can work if they can work? I mean, what are you envisioning as possibly addressing the needs of low-income individuals with the carbon tax?
Well, I mean, I can talk about this for literally an hour. I'll try to.
That's why I asked the question.
I'll try to do it in 30 seconds or less. I mean, there are a number of ways to make a carbon tax or a carbon price economically progressive. The simplest way is probably just to cut everybody a check and dividend the money. On most analyses, that comes close to being economically progressive. You could debate a little bit of that, but mostly it's right. I mean, there are a number of ways you can rebate portions of the money directly to low-income folks and let them decide how it is they would like to take that money and deal with the substantial costs of moving around. But it should be said that gasoline over the last few years has risen from $2 a gallon to north of $4 a gallon, and we're not doing anything really to protect low-income folks from that, market function. So pretty much
That's
anything.
bad, but continues to be bad. I mean, I think.
Congressman Bob Inglis, Republican from North Carolina 2 years ago, proposed a $100 a ton, a carbon tax that would gradually rise to $100 a ton. And I thought it was actually the best climate bill that was proposed in that Congress. And it had prospect of bipartisan support. His proposal rebated half of the money to people, to employees, through a reduction in the Social Security tax paid by the employee, and half to employers as a reduction in the Social Security tax paid by employers, which was a simple way of spreading it between the business sector and the individual sector. I thought it was a pretty interesting proposal.
This is for Jeremy Hewitt. I'm just wondering how BC was able to pass that carbon tax.
Yeah, I get that question a lot, especially south of the border. I actually, that may be the joke, but I think you're
you're absolutely right there. That, I mean, there's a fundamental difference in the way that government operates in Canada than it does in the U.S. And I think, speaking as from a political science perspective, this is just my opinion, it seems that in the U.S., the system is based on checks and balances, a distrust of power, distrust of government, where in Canada, our Constitution talks about peace, order, and good government instead of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. So, I didn't really set myself up here. With that said, when a premier or prime minister has a majority government, it's very easy for her or him to get stuff done. With that said, also there was, we introduced it in 2008 at a time when climate change was top of mind and people all over North America, quite frankly. And in Canada, in terms of public opinion polling, what was the most important issue facing Canadians was climate change at that time. So the timing was right as well. And then the revenue neutrality portion felt huge as well. Yeah.
I would add one thing, which is nearly substantially all of the electricity in DC is hydropower, so there was not the regional disparity in electricity impacts that we have among the 54 or so electric utilities in this.
That's right. There's no impact on the electricity rates. And, we have between 90 and 95% hydropower. We have an RPS of 100% by 2016. So it didn't affect households as much as it would here.
I think you were next, sir.
So Eric, you touched on kind of the trade-offs between price certainty and emission certainty. And I was wondering, given the fact that there's a lot of uncertainty about kind of the marginal damages of a ton of carbon, what are really the benefits of having emission certainty?
I'm not sure I'm going to answer your question exactly. Correct me if I don't answer your question. The best we can do globally with respect to dealing with the threat of climate change, we don't know, as Cliff pointed out, we don't know exactly how severe the impacts of climate change will be, but we can take some level of guidance from folks who understand the climate science and can suggest that certain levels of reduction from current emissions levels or from some baseline emissions levels will set us on a path that looks less risky than other paths. In order to achieve any specified level of reduction, we're going to need some degree of certainty about the reductions we get. So that is to say, if the scientists tell us we need specific levels of reduction to reduce our risk to some appropriate level, we need to know how we're going to do that. One of the difficulties with the tax is that we may have to adjust it periodically and may have to harmonize it around the world to figure out, well, are we actually getting the reductions that the scientists tell us we need? It's a little bit trickier to do that under a tax regime than it is with a cap-based system. But of course, you have the inverse problem with respect to prices. You don't exactly know what prices would do in what amounts to a supply-constrained environment.
I think you were next, sir, back there.
So for Jim Lazar, your preferred alternative is that the government decide what is the best way to reduce carbon emissions. And that sounds fine if you assume the government acts wisely at all times. But I would just raise the question of corn-based ethanol, which was touted as a greenhouse gas reducing measure, and then you get locked into subsidies that we can't get out of, even when we find out that it's working in the opposite direction.